After my father died, my stepmom and stepbrother stole his $85 million business. When I tried to stop them, they pushed me down the stairs to silence me forever. I woke up in the hospital, bruised and broken, but what shattered me most was the truth I discovered when I opened my eyes. It was too late. I never thought my life would be ripped apart by the people I called family. My name is Claire Monroe, and if you're hearing this, it's because I decided my story shouldn't stay buried, just like the truth they tried to hide. I was living a quiet but steady life in Manhattan, working long hours as a junior attorney at a small law firm. Nothing glamorous, but I was building something on my own. My father, Richard Monroe, was a real estate giant, well known across New York for his sharp mind and even sharper business sense. He was worth millions. We weren't extremely close after my mother died when I was 13, but he always told me he was proud of me. Every birthday, every holiday, every phone call, even if short, ended with the same promise. You'll have your share one day, Claire. I've made sure of it. Then came the phone call. Margot, my father's second wife, called me on a rainy Tuesday morning. Her voice was flat, almost rehearsed. Claire, your father passed away last night. Heart attack. My body froze. No warning. No signs. Just gone. I rushed home to the family townhouse on the Upper East Side, the one I grew up in before Margot moved in, and slowly turned it into something cold and silent. Ethan, my half-brother, met me at the door. He barely looked at me. No hug. No tears. Just a stiff nod and a quick, "We've already met with the lawyer." That hit me hard. Already? My father hadn't even been buried yet. We sat in the formal living room, me, Margot in black silk, and Ethan, still scrolling through his phone. The family lawyer, Mr. Bellamy, read the will aloud. I remember each word like glass, slicing through my skin. To my wife, Margot Monroe, I leave the Monroe estate, including all properties, investments, and financial assets. To my son, Ethan Monroe, I leave full control of Monroe Holdings and all business shares. To my daughter, Claire Monroe, I leave my love. That was it. Nothing else. I stared at him, waiting for him to continue, waiting for someone to laugh and say it was a bad joke. But it wasn't. Margot leaned back, her lips curled in satisfaction. Ethan smirked like he'd just won a game I didn't even know we were playing. After the lawyer left, I followed Margot into the hallway. "This doesn't make sense," I said, my voice shaking. "He promised me. He told me I'd get my share." Margot turned slowly, her voice cold and sharp. "Sometimes promises fade, Claire. You're a grown woman. Move on." I couldn't. Something was wrong. My father wasn't the type to forget details, especially about money. I went to his study that night. The room hadn't changed. His scent still lingered, that mix of wood, cologne, and old paper. I ran my hand along the shelves, needing to feel close to him. That's when I found it. A single sheet of paper folded and shoved behind a row of business books. It was a draft of a new will, one I had never seen before. It wasn't signed, but it was typed clearly, and it changed everything. In it, I was listed as a 40% heir to the estate, including part of the company, the townhouse, and several investment properties. The date was recent, only 3 weeks before his death. I took a photo of the document with my phone and carefully tucked it back where I found it. I needed time to think. I needed to be smart. The next day, I confronted Ethan while Margot was out. "You knew," I said, holding my phone. "There was a new will. He was going to change everything." Ethan looked at the screen, then at me. His smile vanished. "Where did you find that?" "It doesn't matter. I'm not going to let this go." He didn't say a word. He just stepped forward and shoved me. I wasn't expecting it. My back hit the stair railing, and the next thing I knew, I was tumbling down. Everything went black. When I woke up, I was in the hospital with a concussion, a fractured rib, and bruises everywhere. The nurse said I was lucky to be alive. I didn't feel lucky. I felt betrayed, broken, and more alone than I'd ever been. I knew then, I wasn't just fighting for money. I was fighting for truth, for justice, for my father's legacy. And for myself, I called Maya, my best friend and fellow lawyer. She rushed to the hospital, furious and ready to help. "They could have killed you, Claire," she said, gripping my hand. "We're going to take them down." Together, we started quietly gathering everything we could. I couldn't trust anyone from the inside, so Maya helped me search public records, business filings, old letters, anything that might support the existence of that draft. But something kept bothering me. Why wasn't the new will signed? Why would my father delay it when he was always so meticulous? I needed help. Someone outside the legal system. That's when I reached out to Detective James Keller, an old contact Maya trusted. He listened patiently as I explained everything. At first, he seemed cautious, but when I showed him the draft will and told him about the fall, he grew serious. "I'll start looking into it quietly," he said. "But if what you're saying is true, Claire, this goes deeper than just a forged signature." I didn't know then what he meant. I was still recovering, body aching and soul raw. But I knew one thing for sure. This wasn't over. It was just beginning. Detective Keller didn't waste time. He started asking the right questions quietly. No uniforms, no paperwork yet, just small moves in the background. He said if Margot and Ethan were smart enough to keep me out of the will, they were smart enough to cover their tracks too. I didn't want to believe my father's death was anything more than sudden, but deep down, something kept tugging at me. He was healthy, strong. He exercised, took his pills, and kept regular doctor visits. A heart attack just didn't fit. While Keller worked from his side, Maya and I focused on the legal angle. We needed to find out if my father had told anyone about the new will. His personal assistant, Karen, was gone, moved back to Chicago 2 weeks after the funeral. That felt suspicious. I got her number through a contact at my dad's office and called her one afternoon. "Claire?" She answered, surprised. "I didn't expect to hear from you. I just need to ask a few things. Please. It's important." She hesitated but agreed. We talked for an hour. She remembered my father being distracted in his final weeks. He was worried, she told me. Said Margot was pushing him to finalize things, but he wanted to make some changes. "Did he mention a new will?" I asked, holding my breath. "Yes. He had me schedule a meeting with Bellamy. He even drafted something on his laptop." I thanked her. That was the proof I needed. He intended to make changes. But something or someone stopped him. The next breakthrough came from Keller. He called me one evening. "I looked into Richard's nurse," he said. "Her name's Donna Pierce. Retired just after his death. Bought herself a new car and paid off a mortgage." I blinked. "With what money?" "That's what I'm finding out," he said. "Also, we pulled his prescription records. One refill doesn't match the doctor's signature." It was happening. The truth was starting to show. Around the same time, I got brave enough to return to the townhouse. Margot and Ethan weren't home, probably out enjoying my father's money. I told the doorman I was collecting old files. He didn't ask questions. I searched my father's study more thoroughly this time. The smell of leather and tobacco made my chest tight. I went through the drawers, files, even under the desk. Then I saw it behind the picture frame on his desk. A flash drive, taped to the back. It was labeled, Private R. Monroe. I took it home and opened it on my laptop. Inside were voice memos. My father had recorded several of them over the course of a week. One of them made my heart stop. I'm not sure what Margot is planning, but I need to protect Claire. I've asked Bellamy to prepare a new draft of the will. Ethan's been acting strange. They both want everything, and I'm starting to feel watched. His voice cracked at the end. I sat there in silence, tears falling down my cheeks. He knew. He saw it coming, but it was too late. I sent the files to Keller and to Maya. We had motive. We had a voice. But we still didn't have what we needed to link it all together. That changed a week later, when Keller called again. I talked to Donna. She cracked. "What?" I sat up straight. She admitted Margot paid her $15,000 in cash to adjust your father's medication. She didn't know the full plan, but she knew it wasn't right. And she kept the bank slip as insurance. That was it. We had proof. But just as things seemed to be turning, Margot made her move. I was walking back to my apartment one evening just 2 blocks from my building. The street was quiet, too quiet. I didn't notice the man until I was just feet from my front door. He stepped out of the shadows fast and grabbed my arm. "This is a warning," he hissed before shoving me hard into the wall. My head slammed the brick and I collapsed. He was gone before I could scream. I lay there for a moment, dizzy and dazed, blood trickling down the side of my face. They weren't just trying to scare me. They were trying to stop me again. At the hospital, Keller met me in the ER. His face was stone cold. "This isn't just about a will anymore," he said. "This is criminal. And now it's personal." Maya stayed with me that night, holding my hand while I lay on the couch with an ice pack on my head. I couldn't stop thinking about the photo of the new will, my father's voice memo, the nurse's confession. "How much longer do we wait?" I asked her, my voice barely above a whisper. "Not long," she said. "Keller's working on a warrant. We're close." The next day, Keller asked me for access to the townhouse's private security footage. Most of it had been wiped, but the tech company that managed the system kept backups for 2 months. What we found made my skin crawl. It was the night before my father's death. The footage showed Margot entering his room around 11:47 p.m. She was carrying something, small like a bottle. 20 minutes later, she walked out, calm and composed. There was no nurse in sight. Keller paused the video. "That's intent," he said. "Now we tie it to the pills." He called me that night with one more piece. "We found traces of a foreign substance in your father's blood work. Something that could trigger cardiac arrest if mixed with his regular meds." Silence filled the space between us. "I think Margot killed him," I finally said. Keller didn't argue. Now we had motive, means, and the moment. The next step was court. But that was going to be a different kind of battlefield. I wasn't afraid anymore. Not of Margot, not of Ethan, and not of the secrets they tried to bury. They thought I'd walk away. That they could erase me, hurt me, scare me into silence. But they didn't know me. Not yet. The day we filed the case, I felt a strange kind of calm. Not peace, but focus. Like everything inside me had sharpened into one single purpose. I wasn't just a grieving daughter anymore. I was a woman fighting for her truth, her name, and everything that had been stolen from her. Maya prepared the legal documents. Keller handed over all the evidence. The nurse's signed statement, the financial records of the bribe, the voice memos, and the security footage. It was more than enough to open an investigation and build a case that would shake everything Margot and Ethan had built on lies. We didn't go public immediately. That was part of the plan. Let them stay comfortable. Let them think I had backed down again. Keller warned me they might still try something. I didn't care. I was done being afraid. A week later, the court approved the motion to freeze the estate assets pending investigation. That meant Margot and Ethan couldn't touch a single dollar of the $85 million they thought they'd won. It hit them hard. Ethan stormed into my office that afternoon, red in the face, furious. "You think you can just take everything?" he shouted, slamming the door behind him. I stood up and looked him straight in the eye. "I'm not taking what's yours, Ethan. I'm taking back what's mine." He laughed bitterly. "You're nothing. You were never part of this family." "You shoved me down a flight of stairs," I said calmly. "You tried to shut me up. But now everyone's going to hear what you and Margot did." His face turned pale for just a second. Then he stormed out. After that, things moved fast. Margot's lawyer reached out to us, trying to settle. They offered a private payout, $5 million to walk away and keep quiet. It was insulting. "I'm not for sale," I told Maya. "And my father's life isn't something you negotiate in private." We rejected the offer. The court date was set. The state had opened a formal investigation into Margot for suspected foul play, and Ethan was being looked into for assault and conspiracy. My name was finally being heard in rooms they never wanted me in. But just when I thought things couldn't get darker, something else surfaced. Keller called me one evening. "We found something in Ethan's financial records. A series of deposits from an offshore account. They started 2 months before your father's death." "What are you saying?" I asked, though I already knew. I think Ethan was part of the plan from the beginning. Not just to steal your inheritance, but to get rid of your father. My stomach twisted. It was worse than I imagined. It wasn't just betrayal. It was a slow, calculated erasure. They planned it together. His death, the forged will, the assault, everything. I couldn't sleep that night. I kept hearing my father's voice from that recording. I need to protect Claire.
He tried.
But in the end, I had to protect myself. Maya helped me prepare my personal testimony. I would have to stand in court, tell my story under oath, and relive everything. The pain, the fear, the betrayal. I practiced for hours, reading aloud, making sure I didn't break down. But no matter how many times I said the words, my voice still trembled at the end. The courtroom was full on the first day of trial. Press had picked up the story. Heiress fights for inheritance in Monroe estate scandal. I didn't care about the headlines. I only cared that the truth was finally being spoken out loud. I sat across from Margot and Ethan, both dressed in black like they were at another funeral. Their faces were cold, unreadable. Mine was calm. I had already buried the version of myself they tried to destroy. The prosecution went first, laying out the evidence step by step. The nurse's statement, the money trail, the video, the voice recordings. Then came my turn. I took a breath and stood before the court. My name is Claire Monroe. I'm here because my father, Richard Monroe, was taken from me, not just by death, but by lies. I was removed from his will, nearly killed for asking questions, and threatened for searching for answers. I've brought forward every piece of evidence I could find, not because I want revenge, but because I want justice. For him.
For me.
For the truth. There was silence when I finished. I didn't cry. I didn't shake. I just sat down and looked across the room at the two people who tried to erase me. Margot wouldn't meet my eyes. Ethan looked down. We still had one more card to play. A witness we hadn't revealed until now, Karen, my father's former assistant. She had flown back from Chicago to testify. She confirmed everything. The will changes, the hesitation, the pressure from Margot. She kept insisting Mr. Monroe finalize the paperwork, Karen said. He told me he didn't trust her anymore. That was the nail in the coffin. Margot's lawyer tried to twist the narrative. Called it grief. Called it paranoia. But there were too many facts, too many lies, too many bruises for anyone to believe her. As the trial neared its end, the judge ordered a temporary transfer of the estate, pending full review, into neutral management. But I was granted access to key assets for the time being. It wasn't a full win yet, but it was movement. I could breathe again. Outside the courtroom, as cameras flashed, I told reporters just one thing. My father raised me to believe in justice. That's what I came for. And that's what I'll leave with. The fight wasn't over yet, but the silence had been broken. The final days of the trial felt like walking through a storm, loud on the outside, but strangely quiet inside me. I had already said everything I needed to say. Now, it was up to the judge to decide if the truth mattered more than the lies that Margot and Ethan had spun like a perfect little web. I tried not to think about the money. I know that sounds hard to believe when $85 million is on the line, but after everything, the number didn't hold power over me anymore. What mattered was my father's name, his intentions, and the piece of my life they tried to erase like I was some mistake. The prosecution gave their final argument. They reminded the court of the broken will, the nurse's confession, the bank slips, the footage of Margot with the bottle, the offshore accounts traced back to Ethan, and the bruises on my body. The case wasn't just about inheritance anymore. It was about manipulation, fraud, and attempted murder. Margot's team tried one last angle. They claimed the footage was taken out of context, that the money given to the nurse was a gift, and that my injuries were the result of an accident. But even their words sounded tired, stretched thin over too many holes. The courtroom waited as the judge left to make a decision. Every tick of the clock felt heavy. I sat next to Maya, who never left my side, and held onto a folded piece of paper in my pocket. It was the last birthday card my father ever gave me. He had written, in his neat, strong handwriting, "Always stay strong. You are more than they know." I didn't know then how much I'd need those words. After what felt like a lifetime, the judge returned. Everyone stood. He began reading his decision, his voice steady and clear. He ruled that the evidence showed strong signs of will tampering, conspiracy, and medical manipulation. He acknowledged that while Richard Monroe's death had not been officially classified as homicide, there was enough doubt and motive to open a deeper criminal investigation. Until then, Margot's control over the estate was revoked. Ethan's business rights were suspended. Both were placed under formal review for fraud and criminal intent. Then he looked at me. Claire Monroe is hereby granted interim control over the estate of Richard Monroe, he said, including all business holdings, real estate, and frozen assets, until a final civil resolution is completed. My knees almost gave out. I didn't cry. Not yet. I just closed my eyes and let out a breath I'd been holding for months. Outside the courthouse, reporters rushed toward me again. But this time, I didn't feel like the broken daughter begging to be heard. I was standing on my own. I told them the truth, just like I told the court. My voice was steady when I said, this was never about money. It was about justice. It was about my father. And it was about me reclaiming what was stolen in silence. Margot and Ethan didn't speak to me again. They walked out of court looking smaller than I remembered, less powerful, without the lies holding them up. I don't know what will happen to them in the criminal case that's coming. That's not my burden anymore. Over the next few weeks, I began stepping into the role I never thought I'd have, running my father's company. The staff was surprised to see me at first, but they welcomed me. Some of them even said my father talked about me more than I knew, that he always wanted me to be part of it. I think that hurt more than anything that he never got to see me in the office with my name on the door. The townhouse was the last thing I visited. I walked through it alone, room by room. It was still filled with shadows of old arguments and quiet betrayals, but there were also memories worth saving. I packed a few things, locked the door behind me, and signed the paperwork to sell it the following week. It was never the walls that mattered. It was the people inside and the truth of who they really were. The estate was valued at $85 million. After taxes, legal costs, and settlements, I ended up with about $34 million. But that's just numbers. What I gained was worth more. I got my voice back. I got my dignity back. And I got the chance to write my own story, not the one they tried to assign me. I used part of the money to open a non-profit legal fund, focused on helping women fight back in inheritance fraud and abuse cases. I named it the Monroe Foundation, in honor of the man who raised me to believe in fairness, even if he didn't live long enough to protect it. Sometimes, I still hear his voice when I walk into the office, or when I sit alone, thinking about how close I came to disappearing from my own life. But I didn't. I fought. I survived. And I stood up when it would have been easier to let it all go. People think betrayal ends with pain, but it doesn't. Sometimes it ends with power, earned, not stolen. Reclaimed, not gifted. My name is Claire Monroe, and this is how I took my life back.